Welcome to Ballot Battleground, Nevada. I'm your host, Ben Margiott, a reporter at News 4 Reno. I'm passionate about making politics in our critical battleground state more digestible to the average voter and pushing past the talking points to press politicians for answers. On this show, we take deep dives into the people, ideas, and debates shaping Silver State politics. Nevada matters quite a bit in presidential politics, even though we have just 6 electoral votes. Part of the reason why is because we vote third in presidential primaries usually, making an important early statement about how voters feel about candidates right before Super Tuesday, when so many states go to the polls. That sweet spot in the presidential nominating order means we get more attention, more candidate visits, more campaign commercials, more importance in the national conversation about politics. But some Democratic leaders here say, well, third is great. We deserve to go first. As for Republicans, they've shown little inclination to change their nominating order, but Dems are making the Silver State's pitch to the DNC that Nevada should lead the slate. One of the biggest cheerleaders for Nevada's first-in-the-nation ambitions is Artie Blanco, who just so happens to be DNC vice chair at large, a longtime Nevada DNC member with connections to organized labor. Blanco is trying to convince those around her at the DNC that Nevada is worthy of that coveted spot at the front of the line. So, should Nevada Democrats choose between presidential nominees first? Our conversation with Artie Blanco. Joining us from our nation's capital, but she's got the ballot-born Nevada right over her shoulder, Artie Blanco, the DNC vice chair at large. Artie, thank you so much for joining Ballot Battleground Nevada. We appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, so you're kind of Nevada's, representative at the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. For people who might not know you, just briefly tell us about your background. You weren't born in Nevada, but you've been doing Nevada politics for, the better part of a couple decades, right?
Yes, definitely. So, born and raised in Houston, Texas, from a union household. My father was a machinist, union member, and I first came across Nevada in 2006 when I worked at the DNC as the Southwest political director. So I was there in 2006 for the election. I came back for the caucuses to help on the early caucuses in 2008. And then in September 2009, decided Nevada was going to be my new home and have been living there and enjoying my time in Las Vegas since.
Yeah, absolutely. You have been here kind of throughout the push for several years now to put Nevada at the front of the presidential nominating calendar. For people who are maybe newer to the state, explain to us how long we've been kind of in this 3 position, voting third, at least in the Democratic primaries. Has it been the whole time that you've been here?
Yeah, it's definitely been the whole time since I've been here. Honestly, the conversation started in 2004, right after the 2004 presidential election. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because if anybody remembers, when we had our caucuses in 2004, it was John Kerry that was running, and there were a couple of other primary candidates that were still in. And our caucuses were actually scheduled on Valentine's Day. And I got that story from folks in Reno who remembered that day. And then we heard from the local media that it was the first presidential candidate in 2004 in that primary season that actually called to place ads about their campaign. So, but after 2004, there was a real conversation from the Democratic National Committee. They put together a Price Herman commission, and it was a commission to look at the early window process, right? So of the primary. And so what ended up happening, there was discussion about New Hampshire and Iowa. These are the only 2 states that are considered early. The early window means 1 month, right? So these are early primaries, and depending on how people perform in the news and all the things that come out, that's what really determines and sometimes propels them into Super Tuesday, right? Which is what we know, and a lot of states participate and have their presidential primaries on those days. So during this commission, Senator Reid at the time was leading the effort, and as representing Nevada, to wanting to lift up 2 additional states. He was part of that group. There were national Democratic leaders that knew we need to expand. Democrats are able to win in elections by having a full complement coalition of voters from different communities, different backgrounds, whether it's economic backgrounds or urban and rural, whichever. There are different communities across the country. And why are we only depending on New Hampshire and Iowa to really have those early conversations with candidates? So there was a real movement to add 2 more states. And so Senator Reid's hard work and many leaders in Nevada really pushed the effort to get Nevada put as the 3rd state, and then adding also South Carolina as the 4th state to really bring diverse voices and conversations for presidential candidates to have prior to going into Super Tuesday during the process. So our first time that it was approved was in 2006 by the DNC as a whole, the new calendar. And then what ended up happening was in 2008 was our first official. We were within the early window. And if everybody remembers that caucus in 2008 with President Obama and Secretary Clinton in that primary. So that's really where it all started.
Yeah. And I guess from my perspective, I was a little bit younger, of course, in that 2008 caucus cycle. But from what I hear about it and remember at the time, it was that cycle kind of proved the importance of the early states, right? Where you need someone, who was relatively unknown in Barack Obama at the time to kind of gain momentum, gain a bigger national platform. Whereas, you might hear some people say we should all just vote on the same day. And I think the argument against that is you would have to run a full national campaign across the country. And someone like a Barack Obama might not have made it through that point or survive kind of the national primary. I do have to circle back to the Valentine's Day story, though, because I think that's hilarious. Democrats held a caucus on Valentine's Day, I imagine. And this also speaks to, the arguments against caucuses, right? Whereas the turnout was probably so depreciated because it's a caucus for one, and then 2, you put it on a holiday like that where people have other priorities. Any funny stories from that caucus?
No, all I know, the only story was actually in Reno, and it was held at a high school. And it was the first time in 2004, again, this was before the official early window, that leaders and local leaders were engaging in that process, and they were at the school, and how so many people had turned out in 2004 that they had to move some precincts out into the field, into like the football field or the soccer field at one of the schools. They had never seen this kind of turnout because it was the first time it was still competitive between John Kerry and John Edwards. So that's who it was between at the time. And Richardson also had team folks on the ground, Bill Richardson, the governor of New Mexico. And so those are kind of those stories. But I will say in 2008, Senator Reid literally was like, this is important for Nevada values to be lifted to presidential candidates, for them to understand how we as Nevadans like really carry ourselves and what are the issues that we care about in the West, and the unique issues of a landlocked state, an important state, and really branch out statewide in terms of having real conversations with candidates to hear our concerns, whether it's about drought, whether it's about water, all the industries that we have, and the workers, and just different stories really was important to uplift. So in 2008, we were able to have over 125,000 participants in the first sort of big caucus. And the party did a really good job of ensuring that voters knew about the caucus and what the process was. In fact, I ran the New York caucus because we also had satellite caucuses, or we called them at-large caucuses, at casinos, so that workers and employees can participate as well from that area. It didn't matter where you were registered to vote in, like in Clark County or even Washoe County. So those little bit of stories there, I guess.
Yeah, I appreciate the backstory. Yeah, and the caucuses, well, at least from my perspective, they are kind of a interesting way that we do politics, harkening back to, making your case in front of your peers for why they should vote for someone. The flip side of that is obviously the accessibility angle and people not wanting to, put themselves out there publicly. And Now that you're the DNC vice chair, maybe you can illuminate some more on how the DNC really sees states that have caucuses versus states that have primaries, and
Right.
probably preferring states with primaries. And that was another piece of the Nevada puzzle, right? To moving us maybe
Yes.
higher up in the list.
Definitely. I think after the 2020, even right before the 2020 was our last presidential nominating caucuses. That was the last time we had caucuses. We were very intentional in 2020 to ensure that, and this was obviously before COVID, but that to ensure that we actually had vote centers, and we actually had early voting. So you could go in and caucus early and put in your vote. But after 2020, we knew we had to keep up with the times. And as a Nevada, being very proud of our state and access to the ballot for all voters, no matter your background or your situation, there was a big decision by our legislators, our governor, to change our process and move into a primary, which now we have a statewide presidential primary the first Tuesday of February. And so currently, now that we've moved into that process, we're having more and more Nevadans that can actually participate because we have a week of early voting, just like we do. We have mail ballot voting, just like we do for regular elections. So it actually offers to have more voices and more representation in determining who we as Nevadans would love to have as our party nominees for president of the United States.
And so, how exactly would that work when it comes to the order? Because, under the state law, Nevada's presidential preference primary has to be on that date. Is it that if we were to go first, under the scenario that you're pushing and fighting for, other states would be behind that date, or that Democrats would run their own separate process outside of the state sanction process the first week of February?
Yep. Well, our goal is to be first, right? So our goal would be we would open up the early window of the nominating process, and that first date would be February 1st because that is currently as our date in current statute. So that's where we would go with, and then the other states that would be named should we be awarded first in the nation, which we will and we
Mhm.
must. And so they would follow behind us. So currently, other states already have dates that were in the early window last time in 2024. Other states that were already in, they also have dates as well. But at the end of the day, we want to kick off the process. We want Nevadans front and center. We meet the entire criteria that the DNC has set forth: our rigorousness, our fairness, our efficiency, and just in general, access to the ballot. We're a small state with two media markets. We represent so much diversity, not only in our communities and ethnicities or race, but also just in our economic diversity. We've got rural, we've got ex-urban, suburban, inner city, just like any state and any in the country. And so we just know that as a populated population, we really do, as Nevada, represent the population of the country. And so we want to make sure that we're opening up and having folks participate. So we're really excited to kick off February 1st, should the RBC uh, agree with us.
Yeah. As a result, if you and Nevada kind of gets its way, we'd be atop the calendar. Other states would move down, such as Iowa, New Hampshire. I assume you don't want to kind of badmouth other states, so to speak.
No,
But when you look at Iowa and New Hampshire, much whiter states, they're small, and so they're easy for candidates to get around. But they just don't represent the rest of the country. What else would you say about Iowa and New Hampshire that we should kind of jump ahead of them?
well, I think that you've already said it. I mean, the fact that they do represent an important sector of our population, but in reality, for Democratic presidential candidates, in order to win in a general election, we need to make sure that we're still communicating with voters of all spectrums in battleground states where we know we need to win. Build that coalition to be able to win in a general election. And in Nevada, presidential candidates can do that. We just had a great event on Sunday where we had Governor Pritzker and Senator Gallego in town. It was our 2-year, what is going to be our anniversary of our February 1st primary on Sunday, which was February 1st, and great conversations and having potential candidates. And we don't know if both of them will be running, but at the end of the day, candidates continue to come. Senator Kelly, Governor Newsom, different candidates from across the country are continuing and still coming to Nevada to talk about our values and our issues. So, we know that I'm not going to talk about any other states. I think it's time for a state like Nevada and the West Coast to really represent, and that presidential candidates understand who we are as voters and people.
For people who might not understand, why is it so important for Nevada to be first? Like, why is this a big deal? Why does this matter for us to move up in the order?
It's important because we have various communities that sometimes our issues are nuanced, that many candidates don't understand. If you're a candidate from Arizona, sure, you have more understanding of what Nevada is about. But if you're a candidate from Illinois or a candidate from Maryland or another state that is not familiar with the West Coast, you don't understand our issues. You don't understand the fact that Nevada, even though we're in a desert and people blame us sometimes, we are really amazing water conservists, right? We conserve our water. We've been doing it for decades. And it is so important for us. And other states are taking our water. Anyway, that's a whole nother issue. But those are important issues, right? And the fact that we are a tourist state. We are a state that on industry in Las Vegas that depends on tourism, that depends on having a good economy in order for people to come and visit and leave their dollars for us. So for us to be able to have a functioning state. So I think that Nevada, we're so diverse in all the pieces. We are diverse in the Latino community, and we're very transient. So people are always constantly moving to our state. So they bring new issues depending on where they're from. Latino community, the fastest growing APIA community, right? Asian American Pacific Islander community. Our African American community has been so strong and has been around. And at the end of the day, in our Native American community, people don't realize that we have over a dozen federally recognized tribes in the state of Nevada. We really do represent. We are the frontier. We were the opening, and folks really need to come and have conversations about why Yucca Mountain having that close, why that's important that we do not put waste into our state, right? I'm totally bringing up policy issues, but I think it's that our spirit of who we are as Nevadans, and we're scrappy and we do the work and we just want to have a great life, and everybody deserves a wage that you can support your family. One job should be enough in order to support your family. So workers' issues, whenever there's a recession, I remember when I officially moved in 2009, made that decision to really become a Nevadan. We were still coming through that recession. Nevada was one of the last states to come out of that recession. And I think that national candidates need to understand that and why Nevada is different. And everybody, that's really it, to be quite honest. I mean, there's so many things I could probably talk about. Why else? But I can't say enough about Latino voters as well. So we need to make a commitment to the Latino community and to all communities to continue to lift up issues and really have real conversations and not just one or two issues. Because honestly, Latino issues, rural issues, they're all the same. We all care about the same thing. It's about a good economic ladder. We can provide for our families. We can have a healthy family and really be able to grow and have a great prosperous life, really.
You said the three kind of main criteria were rigorousness, efficiency. What was the other one?
Fairness.
Okay. In terms of the efficiency thing, does the DNC kind of not like the fact that, Republicans and Democrats would be voting potentially on different days, and the GOP would have this caucus where they might prefer to have, all voters in one state going on the same day? Does that kind of one thing that they might not like about how Nevada operates?
No, I don't think so because, previously, whenever there were changes, and in fact, when the changes were made in 2006, the decision was made, we were in communication with the Republican National Committee as well so that we can all agree. Since then, we have actually reached out to the parties and they have not wanted to engage in conversation. So I don't think that that's so much an issue with the Democratic National Committee because at the end of the day, states and statutes really don't determine what our nominating process is. Our party does. And so honestly, we're just going to continue to talk through why Nevada should be first. We've been doing it. We've been participating early. And I think it's time for Nevadans to be the first state.
Yeah. And we should point out, just for our listeners and audience, Artie makes a good point, which is that the presidential nominating process is separate and apart, really, from the state-sanctioned primary that's in June. And it is a private process altogether that the DNC and the RNC decide how they're going to pick their nominees. And so while we do have this state primary for presidential preference in February, it's up to the parties whether or not they want to participate in that or not. Who actually, it's the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee, right, that ultimately makes the choice. You're on that committee, correct?
Yes, I've been on the committee since 2013.
Okay. Explain to us how it works, how many people are on there, and you guys have received the pitches from a bunch of states now. When do we vote? When do we find out?
Yes. So the Rules and Bylaws Committee, we currently look at the calendar and we approve what is the process in the nominating process. So what happened was 2 weeks ago, there was a deadline for states. There have been 12 states to submit an application for consideration for the early window, right? Not so much the date, but really about being within that early window space to go first. So the meeting that we just had this past weekend was really to talk through those 12 states and bring up issues or questions. And so all 12 states are being extended an invitation to give a presentation to the 49 members of the committee. And those presentations will happen in person. We don't know the parameters yet of those presentations, but our discussion was really to talk about what they should be lifting up, what they potentially were missing in their application, or further questions around some of the things that were lifted up, right? More details and key questions that they may have left out. So we'll probably go through that process and presentations maybe early summer, late spring. I'm not sure. We don't have a calendar yet, but at the end of the day, we know that a decision on the states and the calendar need to be completed before the end of the year, should be set before the end of the year. So that's kind of the timeline for that. So we'll know by the end of the year.
Okay. And what happens if a state kind of ignores the order that the DNC has set out? I believe this happened in 2024 with New Hampshire, where they still held their nominee. I forget if it was a caucus or primary prior to the official window that was set out by the DNC, right?
Yes, they did. Their primaries are set by their Secretary of State in their state. And so their primary was earlier, and so was technically Iowa's caucuses. But what Iowa did was they held their caucus, but they didn't announce results from their caucus until Super Tuesday. So the results of it, they had the event early, and expanded their process in a way I think that allowed for extra people to participate. But there could not be any, but they didn't release those until Super Tuesday, which I thought was really great because it's still Super Tuesday is the first or second Tuesday in March. Of course, I just forgot. But at the end of the day, that's what happened. New Hampshire as well. We have to remember the nominating process really, this is now getting into the weeds of party process. And
okay.
I get nervous about doing that because people are like, what?
Yeah.
All the time. Like, what does that mean? I don't understand. the way that the primaries are done is every state is allotted based on their populations and elected officials how many delegates they are awarded every 4 years for the national convention. And so in 2024, Nevada had 31 delegates. So what happens is when we have a primary, those 31 delegates, there are different levels of delegates, but some of them will be elected based on the results of the primary. So even though someone has an early primary, they still have to have a separate process for figuring out what results are they going to use. So they weren't allowed to use those results because they were outside the window. And there are conversations that have been had about those states that go outside the window. This happened in 2008, actually, where 2 states decided to jump the entire early window. And so there were definitely some issues there, and the RBC had to come back and figure out what next steps were going to be. But sometimes it depends. Your delegates won't be seated. Most of these early states will have a presidential debate that would happen in their state, so they could lose that, although it's a separate commission that decides that. So technically the DNC, we just still have to have a conversation as a committee to talk about what would be some of the factors that we would have to consider if somebody jumped the line.
As we start to wrap up here, I can see how the party benefits in Nevada from having the process, having Nevada go first. I could see how the media benefits. Obviously, I work at a TV station. We'd have all these candidates coming through, campaign spending, all that. From the party standpoint, it helps with organizing and boosting up, the party infrastructure in this state. How would going first help the average voter in Nevada?
I think it would help the average voter by hearing and engaging with these candidates that are coming to town, making sure and getting a sense of who they are before it's early exposure, it's early conversations, it is early. I mean, it's called retail politics. The fact that Nevada is still a small state, candidates come and they go to a coffee shop and they talk with whoever is there. They bring folks from the community in, and then whoever is at the coffee shop can also have a conversation and ask specific questions based on the issues that are important to them. And so for Nevadans to engage, and why it's so important for us, is also making sure that our issues are being up front and center of what we're struggling with in Nevada, or what fixes we know we need that others just don't think about. So for Nevada voters, we become more informed voters because we've seen these people in our state. We've seen them early in our state. And we get to see local news stations such as yourself giving reports about who visited, what were the issues that they talked about. Honestly, it really is about more exposure to that. And that it's okay for us to engage. I mean, we know that what being Nevada first would really strengthen our how we connect with the next future candidates in the next future president of the United States. And those early conversations, that's when we're really testing presidential candidates to be ready for the show when it comes months later. That is what is so important for us, bringing the attention, putting worker stories in front, putting in, whether you're a construction worker, whether you work in a coffee shop or a restaurant, like you can engage, or a casino, and engage with folks and really talk about struggles that we're having. Why in some communities, I mean, the housing costs in Nevada, we know that they've been going up. This was a problem that we were all struggling with before, where people are, venture capitalists should not be allowed to buy buildings and then racking up rents where regular working people can't afford to live. Like, that was actually happening in Nevada, and we got to put a stop to that, right? So I think that's what's so important. We have powerful communities: Latino community, Asian community, Black community, our white voters that are the history of what Nevada is, that we work hard, we play hard, and we have issues just like everyone else. So we can help presidential candidates build that coalition to win in a general election. And that's why, as a true battleground state, Nevada is a true battleground state, winning elections with 1%, 2% or less. That's how we are. And we're very independent minded as a state as well, no matter if you've been there for 1 year or your entire life. There is definitely something about us, and I think us being able to be part of that conversation early, we've got ideas for policy and how to fix things. So it really does give us that opportunity to have more exposure early.
Awesome. I was going to ask you to do your 30-second elevator pitch to someone on the committee, but I think you just did it at the end there. So we can just start to sign off here, Artie. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for making the time. I'm sure that you guys will be keeping us very informed as the process gets closer to finding out where Nevada lands among those early states. Artie, best of luck. And thank you for joining the show. We appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And I'll just close out by saying, the Nevada listeners that are there, if you are hearing about potential presidential candidates coming to our state, you should go out and seek them out where they are and get to know them and meet them. Show up for these events, because really that's the only way we know that our opinions and our values will be shared on a national stage. So thanks, Ben, for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, you bet. 2028 will be here before we know it. All right. Thanks, Artie. Talk to you later. A special thank you to Artie Blanco for joining the show this week, and to my associate producer, Brian Petrus, for his help as well. If you made it to the end of this episode, I really appreciate it. If you have guest ideas, episode ideas, questions, comments, compliments, concerns, anything at all, feel free to shoot us an email at bjmargiott, MARGIOTT, at sbgtv.com, and put Ballot Battleground Nevada in the subject line. And if you have a minute, I'd really appreciate it if you left a rating and a review. That helps the podcast show up higher in searches so more people can discover the show. And one final reminder, if you do want to watch, we are now on YouTube. You can check us out on the News for Reno YouTube page. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.